What is good, my fantasy fanatics? Our favorite day on the NHL schedule is upon us. Happy Saturday. You're tapped in to a weekend special of your daily source for fantasy hockey, betting breakdowns, and of course, NHL news. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. And your boy Big Flip is going to break down all of the news that you need to stack up this paper. Anthony Stolarz, the Mini Wild are banged up. A little bit of a taking a look at some stars that could use a trade elsewhere. Let's tap in and let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I hope y'all are having a good weekend. The hockey action is about to go up a few notches, which is why you're right back to your daily source, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Shout out to the everydayers. Much love, salute, and thank you so much for holding us down, even on the weekends and every single day, making us your first listen. We really appreciate it. I am riding solo today. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more with FanDuel, and new customers can get started right now. Winning $5 wager gets you paid out in $150 in bonus bets. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, my friends. Steele is in here to check me on some bold takes, even though I don't think I have too many on today's episode. I do have some important injury updates. Anthony Stolarz, the Toronto Maple Leafs, we'll get there. These Minnesota Wild are a banged-up bunch. I'll talk a little bit about those players there. Jacob Middleton is now on long-term IR, joining a number of other players that are currently battling injury. And, of course, Keandre Miller, a little update there. And I've been taking a look at some of these struggling fantasy stars and players that we kind of banked on coming into this season, perhaps being cornerstone pieces on your squad that just aren't living up to the hype, but I think they're just far too good to be overlooked, especially when some of these players are being mentioned in trade rumors. When trades happen for players that are struggling, it can give them second life. It can really rejuvenate their fantasy value. And if you have your finger on the pulse, I like to say that, though, these are some angles that can perhaps take a team that is at the middle of the pack in your league over the top, or at least get you knocking on the door for the playoffs, which sooner than later, we're going to have to start looking at that angle. I'm also going to get to a loaded betting board of NHL picks. I got my fire picks ready to rock. We've had a pretty good week there, but let's get started with Anthony Stolarz. This is a goaltender who has been nothing short of a revelation for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And let me hit you with this. Of goalies of 10 or more starts, he is second in the NHL in save percentage with a sparkling .927 save percentage. He is also second in the NHL behind only Connor Hellebuck for goals against at 2.12. Stolarz stole them the game the other night against the New Jersey Devils. He has been sensational, 9-5-2. He's going to be out day to day. I think this is a little bit of a lucky situation for the Toronto Maple Leafs. The injury scare looked a little bit more serious. Head coach Craig Berube comes out saying that this is a best case scenario. He is day to day. And considering how good he was playing, I really don't see the Toronto Maple Leafs rushing him back in any aspect, especially because they got Joseph Woll backing him up. He's also been sensational. They recalled Dennis Hildeby from the AHL club, the Marlies. This is something that, again, you got to keep your eye on. This player just signed a 2-year, $5 million deal in the offseason. A lot of people looking at perhaps him to be the backup coming into this season. That's not the case. He's been the number one goalie, and I think once he's healthy, he will return to the cage as the quote-unquote number one, even though lately it's been a little bit more of a split. The situation is this. Regardless of how long he is out, Joseph Woll has been that good. The Toronto Maple Leafs are lurking around as the top team in the Eastern Conference. There is fantasy value to be had here. So if you can, jump on Joseph Woll. If you have Joseph Woll, he's got to be in your starting lineup. Those are some obvious takes. But look, I've said this on this show multiple times. And this show is for everybody, beginners, experts, fair weather fans that want to jump in and learn a little bit more. We try and provide it all for you guys, including bets in 30 minutes every single day. So some of these moves might seem obvious and not so much to others. So I wanted to come on here. When a top team has goalie issues, your boy's going to be talking about it, good or bad. So Stolarz, day to day, keep your eye on this situation. The Toronto Maple Leafs are going to continue to cook. They got the Detroit Red Wings tonight. Woll will be in the cage. Let's see how he does. Now, the Minnesota Wild, we know that they've been on fire. This team has been one of those groups that I really think has somewhat overachieved this season. Steele's not here to check me on that. 19-6-4, 42 points, sitting right there, 1 point behind the Winnipeg Jets in that Central Division. They are banged up, and usually Jacob Middleton, an injury to a player of this nature, doesn't exactly jump off the page, but he has been very important to this club. And this is also a team that's without Matt Zuccarello, Joel Eriksson-Ek, and they are also missing D-Man Jonas Brodin. And again, Brodin perhaps doesn't jump off the page fantasy-wise. Eriksson-Ek has been disappointing this year, but these are pieces now with all of them out. Perhaps this team starts to fade. So if you are invested into some of the players on this squad, Gustafsson having a great season. I'm not saying do anything with them. Obviously, Kaprizov, you're not getting crazy here, but you got to make sure that you're analyzing these situations, because if those peripheral pieces that you may have been invested in this season on this squad start to fade, you got to pay attention, because that Central Division is tightening in a hurry. And Jake Middleton, speaking of fantasy value, this season, this guy leads the NHL in plus minus at plus 22. He's got 13 points, where a previous career high was last year at 25 in 80 games. But he is a peripheral beast. 76 blocks, 42 hits. It's going to hurt you if you had Jacob Middleton as one of those guys that was holding down your peripheral categories. He's on long-term IR. They go out there and add Travis Dermott on waivers. That's telling me that this might be a long-term situation and not just on LTIR to stash his salary. Unfortunately, they're going to have to get by without arguably their second most important D-man and a fantasy piece. That's probably, this always happens, Jacob Middleton. If you went out there and picked him up early on in the season, probably a waiver wire special, that's probably a team that's near the top of the table, just because of, if you had a couple of other pieces like Jacob Middleton doing their thing unexpectedly, that's when you're near the top. So good for you if you've had him. You're going to have to hit the waiver wire once again. Travis Dermott, I don't know how that's going to work out for the Minnesota Wild. As a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, that's a little bit of a trying situation. However, we'll have Monday's waiver wire special ready to roll for y'all. Have a number of targets that could perhaps fill that Jacob Middleton type void. Very similarly to Keandre Miller, just a quick update there on the Rangers defenseman. This is a player that I talked about on this show so much over the last couple of years, and he has just done nothing but severely disappoint. Once again, he's got 6 points this season, 2 goals, 4 assists, when realistically a year and a half ago, 2 years ago even, when I really started to jack this guy up, he was one of those defensemen in the fantasy realm that was starting to look like he might be a breakthrough player at both ends of the ice, able to throw his body around and bring it with his skating ability. Just super disappointing once again, and it's just clear that he is not that player. And the New York Rangers are a mess right now. They are 2-8 before that Buffalo win the other night, and that's the Buffalo Sabres, who are clearly the worst team in the NHL right now. So there you go, some injury updates for y'all. Keep it tapped right here. We have them coming all week long. And like I said, waiver wire Monday, always important. We'll have some options here to fill in some of these guys that are leaving holes in your roster. I'm going to talk a little bit about some stars underperforming that could benefit from a trade elsewhere. Looking at you, Dylan Cozens, and I got my big time bets coming up right after the break. However, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed, your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. You know how we feel about Indeed here. You got to be checking it out. And listeners of our show right now get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOn right now and support this show by saying you heard about this on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Indeed.com/LockedOn. Terms and conditions apply. You need to hire? You know what it is. You need Indeed. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with number one sportsbook in America. That's FanDuel. Right now, new customers that bet $5 and hit, get that $150 back in bonus bets. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more right on the same page where you're already making those bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started, and you'll get started with that $150 back in bonus bets. If your first $5 bet hits, that's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Giddy up, my friends. Another solo episode with your boy. If you've been feeling it, drop us some comments, smash the subscribe button wherever you're at. We really appreciate the feedback. I think you probably hear that from Steele and I more than anything else that we drop on the pod, but it just holds true. Doing this for you guys, hearing the feedback, how you're doing in your leagues means the world to both of us. So please keep it up. We hope that we've been helping you get to the top of your league at least a little bit, or at the very least, putting a little bit of money in that pocketbook with daily big-time bets. I'll get to mine. I write a Saturday column over at Dauber Hockey. I always have my Saturday bets and breakdowns up every single Saturday morning, so tap into that. If you want a little bit more of an in-depth breakdown, I got you. You know we're a little bit degenerate around here on this show, but that's okay. Now, I'm looking at 3 players here. 3 players that, 2 for sure, came into this season with a whole lot of fantasy love. And the third player, well, I'll talk about it. I'll get it out of the way right now. It's John Gibson, but I still think he can benefit from a trade elsewhere. And the first player is garnering a ton of attention right now. Dylan Cozens, the workhorse from Whitehorse, 6 goals, 7 assists this season, 75 shots on net. He's playing a career high in ice time. He's up to almost 18 minutes a night in ice time, but he's just not really getting it done. And let's be clear, the Buffalo Sabres are a complete you-know-what show. It rhymes with hit, and it's not good. So when you see these kinds of comments come out from Kevin Adams, the general manager, in the media, if you missed those, I implore you to go check them out. This is going to unravel quickly for this team. We discussed it earlier in the week. If you want more of a breakdown on the Sabres, tap into the channel and listen to that episode. Let me just say this. Dylan Cozens is far too good of a player, and the fact that you have experts out here like Elliot Friedman saying that he has multiple suitors interested, it totally makes sense to me. And considering the mess that currently is on and off the ice for this Buffalo Sabres team, you could probably throw a few different players into this hat in terms of being traded out of Buffalo and rejuvenating their fantasy value. I swear down, if Dylan Cozens gets traded to a good team, he's going to explode. So I don't want to necessarily say buy low on Dylan Cozens right now, because if he doesn't move, I don't know what that means for the rest of his season. I just know this. Dylan Cozens has been a stud everywhere he has played. WHL, Lethbridge Hurricanes, insane. He racked up 10 goals and 15 assists in 14 World Junior Championship games. He was sensational for Canada. Gold medal, silver medal. And then he lit it up at the World Championships in 2022 and 2024. 16 goals and 8 helpers over 20 games. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the international game and the NHL game are the same. What I am trying to say is, when you see the caliber and the quality of this player, especially, I know his numbers have been a little bit up and down in terms of offensive production, peaking out at 68 points in 81 games a couple of seasons ago to dip back down to 47 last year, and clearly underperforming this year. This just feels like a player that really does need a change of scenery, a move to a new team that could really reinvigorate his fantasy value, and I'm looking squarely at Dylan Cozens. Keep your ear to the ground on this one. If more rumors start to rumble that he is on his way out, I'm pulling the trigger on this one right away. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to try and get myself a little piece of Dylan Cozens. I don't know how we would do that in terms of what it would take to get Dylan Cozens back, but I think right now might be that time to start poking around, especially if these rumors continue to heat up. So that one makes a whole lot of sense for me, looking at his style of play and what he can bring on the offensive end, that high motor. Just so much to like about a player that's also only 23 years old, I believe. Maybe he's 24 now. He's going to be turning 24 anyway. 7th overall draft pick in his prime. You got to be keeping your eyes peeled on this situation. 2 other players. Not really in the rumor mill, this next one in Noah Dobson, but I am done with the New York Islanders in terms of looking at this team for fantasy options. They are a fantasy graveyard. And I've been burned by Sorokin. I've been burned this season by Barzal. I know those are 2 different issues, an injury. Sorokin, obviously, dealing with the coach and having to play with Semyon Varlamov, even though he's, in my opinion, been clearly the better goaltender. Noah Dobson coming into this season, he was definitely one of the first 4 or 5 fantasy D-men off the board in most leagues. And when you're looking at 3 goals, 14 assists, 17 points through 31 games, for most D-men, you'd probably be pretty happy with that. But when you looked at his kind of progression, a few seasons ago, 51 points, 2 seasons ago, he had 49, and then last year, a big stepping out season with 70 points, and he still brings the peripherals, 180 blocked shots last year and 84 hits. This year, yeah, you're still getting a little bit of that peripheral love, 61 blocks and 27 hits, basically right on par for last season's numbers. This guy offensively, the New York Islanders are just a black hole that suck in players that should be imagine Noah Dobson on a team with some kind of offensive upside of any kind. This New York Islanders squad, and I looked this up, they're 24th in the NHL in goals for, and they have the second worst, they might as well have the worst power play in the NHL, only clicking at 12.8%, only outperforming the Boston Bruins, who are having a whole world of hurt trying to score goals. Noah Dobson, yeah, of course. I don't see anyone in New York wanting to move this player. But to me, considering what I've seen on the ice from the New York Islanders this season and how many GMs out there I'm sure are just pulling their hair out with what Noah Dobson has done this season. And again, 17 points. I'm not trying to poo-poo on a guy, but when the expectations were that this guy finished 8th in Norris voting last year, and he had a 70 piece in points, 60 assists. I had a lot of expectations. I had a lot invested into this player, and I'm sure a lot of people out there who are listening to this were also highly invested into Noah Dobson. So when I look at a player that fits the mold, who could really benefit from a move elsewhere, it's got to be Noah Dobson right there at the top of the list. So I wanted to throw that name in there, even though much differently from Dylan Cozens, name isn't right there at the top of the list in terms of potential, teams calling. Apparently there's 6 or 7 teams calling about Dylan Cozens. I really don't think that's anywhere near the same with Noah Dobson, and they're not willing to move him. However, the point holds true. And if for some reason this team continues to spiral, or, spiral, it might be a bit of a relative term. I'm going to just pull up where they're standing today. 31 points in the Metro Division, only 3 points adrift from the Columbus Blue Jackets in the basement, 4-4-2 in their last 10 games. Hey, maybe they do look to shake things up, even if it is a cornerstone blue liner. Think of the return they could get, and if you're looking to turn the page, why not do it with one of those big names now? Much less of a name. Before we get to big-time bets, I got 3 picks, player prop, 2 money line bets ready to rock. I think you're going to like them because I'm liking them. John Gibson, 4-4-1, 3.01 goals against and a .903 save percentage. Considering how bad the Ducks are, I actually don't think that's nearly as bad as it sounds. And I know he's reeled off 4 straight losses, and I believe over that stretch, let me do the math here. You guys know me and the numbers quickly. 14 goals over the last 4 games. This is a good goaltender who still has a lot left in the tank, and this is a player that has been mentioned at length. They are giving him a little showcase, giving him the run out, because that's Lucas Dostal's crease in Anaheim. I have been saying that for 2 full seasons now, and this year my boy is making me look good because that is a fact. He is a very good goaltender, and that's his crease. However, over the course of John Gibson's 12-year NHL career, he has a .910 save percentage, 25 shutties, and a .290 goals against average, and goals against can sometimes be a lot more indicative of that poor play of the team in front of him, whereas I believe save percentage is much more of an indication of the quality of a goaltender. So considering he's been on the Anaheim Ducks his entire career, and over the last 5 or 6 seasons at least, they have been really, really bad, like metrically the worst. This is an important piece that goaltenders at this stretch of the season, while GMs in the NHL are really assessing their roster, a goalie like John Gibson could become very attractive, a veteran, a guy who's been there, a guy who is a 2-time All-Star, someone who has also in his career got a little bit of playoff experience. He's got a .912 save percentage in the playoffs as well. Been a little while since they've been in there. However, the point remains. If he gets moved to a contender, because realistically, I don't see a team having to take on that contract that isn't a winner, he is going to become fantasy relevant immediately. So I wanted to throw some of these names onto the radar, especially Cozens and Gibson, that could be sneaky moves that take your team over the top, especially if you've been struggling so far. We got big time bets coming up right after the break. and we'll be back for Monday's waiver wire special. You know what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a sweet new app. Steele and I have been loving it. Make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. And right now, you can win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Join this holiday season's Prize Picks are giving away 2 free picks in December and giving away $30+ million in rewards during Pixmas. You got to be getting in on Pixmas with Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today, use code LOCKEDONNHL, and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. Thank you so much for joining me for the solo Saturday special of your daily source for fantasy hockey news. We get you guys in and out in 30 minutes. News, fantasy takes, big-time bets at the end of every single episode. Drop that 5-star review. Check us out on Twitter. Check us out on Instagram. We're up on YouTube Shorts. We're everywhere that you need to take in your favorite content. Let's get down to business. DJ Tiesto voice. You guys know how I feel about Saturdays. I'm usually jacked up on this show, full of energy, a couple of wobbly pops ready to go. Saturdays, picks. This is what gets the blood flowing for me on the weekend when it comes to taking a look at these NHL betting boards. 3 picks. I'm taking a look first and foremost. I mentioned a little bit about the Toronto Maple Leafs and how I've been feeling about their play. This is a team much more committed to the defensive end of the rink. Chris Tanev leads the league in block shots. He's up to over 80 block shots already. The guy's been a beast. This team is different now. And the Detroit Red Wings are a little bit of a mitigated mess, and they've struggled against the Toronto Maple Leafs over their last 10. The Leafs are 6-3-1 in their last 10 against the Detroit Red Wings, and actually I think the numbers get better as you go farther back. 11-4 in their last 15 against the Red Wings. The Red Wings are a little bit banged up. The Red Wings have also dropped, aside from beating the Buffalo Sabres in really ugly fashion, and that's the Buffalo Sabres. The Detroit Red Wings haven't won a game since November 27th. They are through a really rough stretch of play right here, and the Leafs are ready to roll. I think this one is going to end in a kind of a neat and tidy 3-1, 4-2 type fashion, so I'd also lean to the under in this one, but I really like the Maple Leafs as my first pick on the money line, and let me hit you with my second pick. Actually, let me just make sure here. Yeah, second pick. Look, I have bet on Quinn Hughes quite a bit this year. Anytime assist for Quinn Hughes has hit for me 4 or 5 times on the pod. And this is a player that right now racking up assists with regularity, playing against the Boston Bruins. In his career, in 9 career regular season games, Quinn Hughes has 6 assists against the Boston Bruins. He has 27 assists in 28 games. The pick is Quinn Hughes anytime assist. He had 2 last time out against the Florida Panthers, so the price might not be the greatest. I could see him getting a couple of apples in this situation. Boston Bruins, a bit of a mess as well. So, second pick, Quinn Hughes, anytime assist, and let me get to my favorite pick on the night. Tampa Bay Lightning the other night had one of those kind of come-together, galvanizing team wins, 8-3 over the Calgary Flames, and I know the Calgary Flames are what they are, and it's not like tackling a giant. That is still a big-time morale-boosting win. Nikita Kucherov, 6 points. I think this is going to kickstart a little bit of a heater for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they roll into a Seattle Kraken team that in their 6 meetings overall, they have not dropped a single game. They dropped 1 in overtime. 5-0-1, this Tampa team against the Seattle Kraken. The Kraken, in my opinion, are just very average. They beat Boston 5-1, bad team. They lose 2-1 to Florida, good team. Beat the New York Rangers, really bad team. So what I'm trying to get at is, over the last 10 or so, this Seattle Kraken team is beating bad teams and losing to the good ones. And that might be a little bit of a simple angle to take here. But when you look at what Tampa's doing offensively, you look at the recent head-to-head matchups, and then you take a look at the Kraken as well. The Tampa Bay Lightning also, for some reason, love playing against the Pacific Division. 7 straight games against the Pacific Division, all wins for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So I'm going to keep this one short, sweet, and simple. Tampa Bay Lightning on the money line into Seattle. That's my favorite pick. That's my lock of the night. Put it along with a Quinn Hughes anytime assist in Toronto on the money line. Slap those 3 together into a little parlay. I'll be betting them singularly as well, but I really like that as a 3-game parlay. put those together, make a little bit of that Christmas money. We got Hanukkah coming up. We got all kinds of holidays and bills to pay for, and that's why you're tapped in to your daily source for betting news and, of course, fantasy takes. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Your boy Big Flip signing off for the Saturday special. We'll be back on Monday with Steele for our favorite day of the week other than Saturday, Monday waiver wire, baby. Thank you so much for joining me. Talk to you soon.